All right. Well, welcome to our next edition of That Stuff in the Bible. As a church, for as many of you know, we are reading through the entirety of the scriptures in one year. And in so doing, we're kind of encountering and running into, well, challenging, like unclear, confusing at times, or just difficult passages or sections of the scriptures. And by nature, we end up having to ask or wrestle with some of the questions that emerge from the passages in the scriptures. And one of the things that is certainly not present only in the areas like the book of Job, but certainly in the book of Job, is the question of the problem of pain. And that's one of the things we're going to get to talk about tonight in this particular That Stuff in the Bible. I'm super excited about having our three panelists with me tonight. So I'm going to give each of them a chance to give us a 1 minute kind of who are you, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, what you do, what you love, and then we'll jump all the way on in. So, Ivy, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ivy Tyson. I've been going to RCC for something like 3 or 4 years, and I moved out here for work originally, and RCC has really become my home here in Georgia. And so I spend a lot of time at church, so I hang out with the youth group, help out Matt with sermon prep team stuff, and get to do fun stuff like this. So I have no real qualifications to talk about this topic other than the fact that I'm, a human who experiences things she would prefer not to. So that's really the only reason I'm here, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
That's awesome, Ivy. All right, Donna, what about you?
My name is Donna Smith. I've been going to RCC for a long time. I've been married for a long time, about a half a century now. And I love my God and my church and my kids and my grandkids.
And the half-century husband.
Yeah, I love him too.
It's a great book title.
That's a good give him a t-shirt, the half-century husband. That's good.
Yes.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know, Donna's also Deacon to Women at RCC, which is awesome. So, Dave Mayer.
Yeah, I'm Dave. Me and my wife Steph and my son Rip have been coming to RCC since we moved here from Denver about 2.5 years ago. So that's a long story we won't get into. But suffice it to say, I love the outdoors. I also love working with guys on the masculine journey stuff. That's how I get into doing therapy and spiritual direction and soul care kind of work. Yeah, that's kind of the size of it.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm super excited about kind of getting to jump into this conversation. I wanted to let everyone know who's on the attendees side. You have the section at the bottom here that says Q&A, and you have an opportunity to kind of just kind of ask some questions or some clarifying pieces, or maybe if you have a thought here or there that you want to toss in there, we'll kind of use that as kind of our catch-all environment. You can also comment on some of the other people's questions, or if you really are like, oh yeah, I really like that question, if you like it, it'll push it to the top. So you can even like your own question, which pushes it.
No,
that's one way you can self-promote your own queries. Anyway, we'd love to be able to have a little bit of interaction, particularly as we go along. So we're going to kick off with kind of a general or broad question for each of you. Like you to kind of, we're going to, for those of you who haven't been a part of these, what these conversations are like, they're actually a conversation like the four of us are in my living room and we're having a conversation about that, and everyone's getting to kind of listen in and then maybe texting in a question. It's kind of how we're playing this out as. So the question I just kind of want to ask you guys, and Dave, maybe you can kick us off tonight on this, is like how have you wrestled with the problem of pain, with the reality of pain in your life, both in good and in not good ways, particularly in light of your understanding of the scriptures, having been a man who knows the word? Like what does that look like, and how have you wrestled with that? Again, good and not good ways. God is all powerful and he's all good. Then how do I have, so why is there pain, so much pain for me? Why is there so much pain for the people I love? And so what's that look like for you?
Yeah, and why am I just not eternally happy, right? Always.
Right.
Aren't you? Is
yeah,
that your happy face?
Yeah, I think for a long time, I really didn't even know what my pain was. That was a confusing idea until I got into some relationship later and then looked back at life and thought, okay, there have been a lot of moments that weren't so great. And when I wasn't aware of what my pain was largely when I coped with it poorly. So specific instances going through my life connected to events that were abusive and events that were kind of neglect. Those taught me to do pain on a bad day, like an orphan. And for me, an orphan has a particular kind of wisdom, right? That's geared towards survival, and not so much towards intimacy. And that worked. My orphan wisdom, my doing pain in a bad way looked like isolation, looked like lying, deception. I probably clocked, 2 decades as just kind of a compulsive liar, where I had a different set of deceptions for each kind of category of person in my life. It also looked like medicating. So I struggled with a bunch of addictions in my life. Who knew that if you isolate in pain, you would medicate it? But that's true. Just in case you're wondering, that is true. You will medicate it. So yeah, I had my little grab bag of stuff that I would turn to, both chemical and process sorts of addictions. I guess it was about 12 years ago, 15 years ago, is when I started pulling some of that pain into the light with some good men in my life. Interestingly enough, the first time I told my story of pain, it was actually someone else's tears that brought mine forth. So for me, that kind of, it denoted a new way of doing pain that involved intimacy. And in those relationships with those men, and even into a relationship now with my wife, I think doing pain in a good way means understanding for me that there's something more important on the table than my happiness or my personal particular pain. That God is after something more than just providing happiness or alleviating pain. So to be specific, I think that thing is relationship, is connection, is intimacy. So yeah, when I'm doing pain in a good way, I'm learning to share it with the people around me.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Ivy, Donna, what does that look like? Even from the angle of like wrestling with the God who's allowing this pain, right? What does that journey look like for you as you guys have worked it out and worked it through?
Well, unlike Dave, I was real clear on when I was in pain. I knew what pain was when it hit me, because I grew up in a great family that was like Disney damage family, and I expected life to look like my growing up life in this really good, wonderful family. So when I hit pain head on, believe me, I recognized it. And I've never done pain well in the pain. I've never.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done pain well. When I do pain well is after the fact, when I'm out of it and I can look back and recognize what God did in that for me.
So what does that mean when you say I don't do pain well in the middle? What does that manifest?
Well, for me, in the middle of pain, I do lean in. I think I lean into God well. The only thing I do well in pain is I lean into God well. I'll scream and beat on his chest and shout, and I think he's a safe place for that. I actually even this you might not be able to find this in scripture. I actually think that God almost loves it when I lean in that hard and am that honest with him. I think he probably loves that kind of intimacy. I even thought that when you were teaching Sunday, Matt, on Job, and I think I realized for the first time that God didn't ever show himself to Job until Job opened up and did that. I mean, until Job got real honest and started railing at him, he didn't even show him. God didn't even show himself to Job until then. And so I actually think God's such a safe place for us to shout and scream and be honest. And that's the only thing that I've ever done right in pain, is, yell at him. But Well, that's probably enough for now.
I love it. And yeah, because you've had a minute or two of that. So Ivy, what about you? What does that look like for you?
Um, well, first off, I apologize in advance for any ambient noise. The joy of apartment life is you just never know what the neighbors are going to do. So we'll embrace it. Um, I think for me, we were talking about this the other night when we were kind of doing our initial chat about this topic, and um, Dave said something really interesting that made me realize that I feel like I just maybe do pain badly all the time. So I feel like I kind of what really happens is I kind of waver between extremes. And so either, depending on where I feel like the suffering is coming from or like what it's doing in me, either my first instinct is to flee. So just like deny it's happening at all and just say, nope, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm good. Like somehow by like not acknowledging it, it just like won't impact me because, that's how reality works. Or I end up internalizing it. And there are particular wounds in me that God has really done a lot of work in me over the course of my life, over and over again, to kind of coax me out of identifying with my damage,
Mm.
and kind of allowing that to start defining how I saw myself or
Yeah.
how I spoke over myself or what I believed when other people told me.
Mm.
And so I feel both of those tendencies in me sometimes, just kind of depending on the day or the hour sometimes. I think when I'm doing it right, um, I just really appreciate what both of you said. So doing it in community is important, hearing wisdom from other people,
Yeah.
to kind of offset the voices in my head. The Lord's used that to great effect for me, which I'm really thankful for.
Mm.
And then also just learning how to bring it to the Lord and how to be honest about my disappointments.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to even be comfortable expressing disappointment with God, and so I'm still working on that, but engaging that process has been a huge help. So
What
that
was,
I would say that's made a difference.
I mean, what was it that made it difficult for you to bring it to God? What was the either the belief or the theological block or the what was the
No, not a theological block. And I know we talked about this kind of earlier amongst ourselves, but I actually think one of the great difficulties in this for me is that isn't that my theology isn't good, but it's that I don't allow my theology to actually pastor my heart when I'm in the middle of a crisis. And so suffering is really where the rubber meets the road of who do I think God actually is. And for me, it's the difference between believing he's going to be who he says he is rather than him going to be the way that my dad was
Yeah.
or whoever else it was that disappointed me. And
Yeah.
so that's been a long process for me. God's done everything to earn my trust, but I have a hard time giving it anyway.
Yeah.
So making sure I'm talking to the real God and not a version of him is the trick for me.
Yeah, Ivy, I think that's really insightful that, it's when you're suffering that you get to see kind of what's under the hood, or, it's like when you squish something, you see what's on the inside, it's like when there's no pressure, all of that stays contained. So that's
Yeah.
one of the dynamics that I think is valuable there. So
yeah,
Mm.
Abby, you talked about the kind of running to two directions. I think one of the ideas about like either like get the get over it methodology, right? Of I'm in pain, get over it, just push through, like squash it, push it, or just self pity, right? I'm just going to roll around in this vat of sadness and self pity for a really long time. So what does that look like for you guys? As you've kind of how have you negotiated your soul with the Lord or without the Lord out of those either one of those pits? What does that look like? Because those are, and again, we usually make friends with one of those more than another, right?
yeah.
And there may be more pits, but let's just talk about those two because those are kind of classic. And other people, by the way, will invite us into those pits, which is awesome. So,
Yeah.
but what has been your kind of your navigation process towards light out of the pit? Like, what does that look like for y'all?
Navigation. I mean, catastrophic failure is what gets me out of it. It's not navigation. It's if I isolate long enough, I just start dying, and there's grace in that, like the safety net of grace in there. That's like, yeah, you're supposed to die if you do it without God and without the good people in your life. So it was more the rot that made me change course than, some kind of like I'm choosing a path sort of thing.
So, but do you tend towards the self pity or towards the get over it, buck up, be better?
Yeah. Yes. I'm
Yeah.
capable of both. Yeah.
Both.
I'm fond of blame. I really like blame, and I really like
Yeah.
like marinating on my own anger internally, ruminating. Those are my brands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What about you, ladies?
I think my extremes might look a little different from Ivy's extremes. If your perfect balance of your perfect relationship between you and God, that perfect balance, which we never, of course, really hit, but we swing through it every once in a while. But for me, the extremes are way over here on this side of I really don't deserve this and it's unfair, in the middle of pain, or at the opposite end of the continuum is I deserve way worse than this because it was my own sinful choices that brought on this pain in the first place. So I have always lived over in the this is my fault because I've made such big choice. So, the realization for me has been just in the last few years that either one of those extremes are arrogant self-absorption because it's all about me. When it should be about, God, what do you have in this for me? What is this about? What is it and what do you have in it for me to learn, and all that stuff, instead of just focusing on me.
Mm.
So it's a little bit different
Yeah.
as far as the extremes, but
Right? I mean, when we're in pain, it's like the most natural thing is to think about the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all
Getting
over
out of it. Yeah.
it. And that's why that's why that as we've there's the talking about it in theory. I think that's why there's a clear sense of trying to wrestle with the theology of both God's goodness and his sovereignty, right? That he can do whatever he pleases, and that so he's all powerful in that way, and yet he's all the way good, and yet here I am, right? So that's the wedge that and so trying to move from that without taking ourselves into consideration. Again, Ivy, I think you mentioned the kind of the get over it thing is you have more familiarity maybe with that. I don't know if that's how you said it, but what does that look like for you as you wrestle both with God and with yourself on that?
Yeah, I think for me, the way I respond to suffering is normally due to where I think it's coming from or what I think causes it. And so, uh, if there's something that usually, I mean, this says a lot about me, but if it's something that I caused or that I know I've kind of brought on myself or on other people, that's when I'm like that. Nope, not a big deal. Ignore it. That's not a thing. Because facing up to that requires me to own my own wrongness, and having to repent, and the call to humility there is pretty painful to me. And Donna, to your point, like I really see the ways that this brings out kind of my more habitual sins, right? But they're all very much to protect my self-image or my ego or the way I see myself or the way other people see me. And so I fight that a lot. Um, and in some ways, the other direction of that, if somebody does something to me or if, just there's hurt in the world that I'm encountering, I don't have a very strong sense of justice. Donna, I really admire that about you. That sense of fairness is kind of lacking in me. So I don't look for it maybe even when I should. And so when something bad happens to me, it's much easier for me to take it on almost as like an identity thing, or I feel the emotion and the relationality of it a lot more than I feel like a justice claim. So it's not often that I would say this isn't fair, even if maybe it's not. I'm more likely to say this hurts and then to weaponize the hurt against myself in a way that isn't helpful. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the things I really wanted us to get to spend some time on, because in my experience as a pastor, I oftentimes get to be with people in their pain. And candidly, I think you probably won't be super surprised by this, but how often when I'm with people in their pain, they either don't want to talk about it with other people, or have been really hurt by how people have handled them. So it it's amazing how good theology can hurt good Christians, right? By how we express it, articulate, how we move within the realm of the pastoral, theological care, love. So I'd love to kind of have you guys talk a little bit about the ways in which you have been maybe like that would be things that have been most helpful that you've experienced from other people in key moments of pain in your own life that have actually moved you, that have helped be a North Star, or a little bit of a navigator towards hope, towards health, towards maybe even repentance potentially, and then things yourself that you feel like people have been able to reflect back that, hey, this was really, really helpful. So maybe we can talk a little bit more on the helping each other, like some of the best to do's and not to do's in some ways. Again, I know there's no formulas, and I'm not trying to go for that, but just some principles that have been significant for y'all. So any of y'all just kind of jump in on that. I think that might be really helpful. And again, I'd actually love to hear how it's been particularly effective and impactful to you.
So just offhand, for me, my time I spend with the Word and in Scripture makes a huge difference. And so being in a community or being with people that encourage me towards the Word, in all of its reality, not just to make me feel better, but what's actually there. Just good old-fashioned Bible study, like on topics that don't even seem related to my situation, often does a lot of good to my soul. Um,
What's
but I've also just
what's the invitation typically in that? Because that could feel like platitude, right? Like, hey, just read your
Yeah.
Bible, it'll get better. So what's inside that invitation that's actually been meaningful or helpful to you?
For me, the Word and reading the Word is the primary way that in my life that God communicates with me. And so it's the place where I'm able to hear Him most clearly. And I think to kind of confront the reality of who He is, especially when I get kind of wrapped up in myself, encountering um, the mercy of God in that, but also the bigness of Him, I think is helpful. Um, and then I guess more practically, just from a people standpoint, I think of um, some things that have happened to me in my life, and I'm thinking especially of my parents split up when I was a teenager, and just the difficulty of that, and kind of struggling over the loss of my dad and the rejection, and feeling that rejection very clearly and having a hard time shaking that even now, having to kind of reject that word that says you're not worth loving, you're not worth staying for. The thing that's made the biggest difference for me in the years around that wasn't so much any one like amazing piece of advice. It was the people that just showed up and were just a part of my life. And there are hundreds of little collections of moments where somebody was able to say the right gentle word to me at the right time. But no one of those things fixed it. It was an accumulation of long-term investment, from people that just showed up
Yeah.
and just loved me and were content to kind of do it like one conversation at a time.
Yeah.
And I try to take that to heart now when I'm talking to other people, because I remember that really made a big difference for me, and that's how it had to happen for me, because I had different questions and different concerns and different feelings from days to weeks to years. So having people who are willing to stick with it and me and be present and just kind of do it one day at a time really meant a lot. So I try to do that now with other people, or I'm trying to learn how to do it anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I want to echo what you just said, Ivy, about the showing up piece, just the showing up piece. Looking back on my seasons of pain, it's almost always been about, for me, God taking a relationship out of my life that was too important to me. So I remember long ago, one particular breakdown of a relationship that left me lying in the road bleeding. And I was in a Bible study at the time, and those women, they let me show up every week and not participate. And I would just sit over there in the group and cry, but I never said anything or participate. I mean, it was just, I would just show up and cry every week because it was a safe place to show up and cry. And nobody tried to make me do anything other than that. They just let me do that. And it was one of the most amazing things. And it was a very healing thing. And I've just always remembered that. And one of the funniest things I saw in Job this time was when he said to his friends, miserable comforters are you all. It cracked me. I don't know. I think I've never seen that before. I was like, That's the funniest thing I've ever heard, because that's who we are a lot of times to each other, just miserable comforters. And, in that period, those women were not. They were not miserable comforters. They were, healing comforters, just with their silence. They just showed up.
Which Donna, just um, speculate with me for a minute. What do you think it is in us that goes against that keeps us from being able to be that kind of space giving? What are some of the things that you've experienced or even seen in you that make it so difficult to be those kinds of people when people are hurting in our midst, in front of us, on the front row of our lives?
Well, for me, it's just uncomfortable because I think I should be able to. I know I can't do anything. I know only God can, but somehow I think I should be able to offer something to someone. And many times, if you go ahead and try to do that, it's the wrong thing you offer. So I just think it's hard for us to be quiet and just say, I love you or I care, instead of trying to be a fixer.
Yeah.
Dave,
What do you
you speak to that. You're the counselor.
No pressure.
I think one of the things that makes it really hard to listen to people's pain is when it sounds too much like your own,
Oh,
or when what they have to say smells like, feels like, looks like something that lives in your closet. So on a good day, I like to recognize that and say, okay, God, so you put this person on the couch in front of me talking to me about some issue that I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So in the moment, God, give me grace to be with them in it and not freak out, right? And then remind me, when I walk in the house tonight, let me remember to share this with my wife. Let me share this with the men in my life. But I think that's probably the biggest hindrance. And speaking more from a personal lens, I have a hard time trusting my pain to people who haven't stood in their own. That's kind of the litmus test for me when it comes to being in real-time pain with other people, is, have I seen you be in yours?
Yeah.
So if you're really
Yeah.
looking for tips and tricks in terms of how to be with people in pain, be with God in yours, and be with the people in your life in your own pain, and let that form and inform you. On a practical note, if you make it really tangible, I think there's phases to pain. At least there have been in my life. Like, I actually, when I'm sharing my pain with people, I really do want them to help me alleviate the pain. I'm looking for that, but
Yeah.
not right away. I on the upfront with pain, when I'm sharing pain with somebody, I just want their ears in that moment. I want them to suffer with, right? I want you to connect and use the pain in your own life to empathize with what I'm sharing with you. So once I feel heard, like once I feel like somebody's actually wrapped their mind and their heart around the ways that I'm hurting, then I'm actually all ears. Then I actually want to be challenged, or I want to be reminded that, like, hey, Jesus is with you in this pain. Have you seen Jesus suffer this way in the Gospels, or something like that? But if that word comes too soon, before I feel like I'm heard, suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, you don't get it. You don't understand. You don't know me. I'm just shutting down. Get me out of here. So those are my tangibles from my own life.
Yeah, the sense of the discomfort, gosh, having had people tell me about, friends of theirs after they've lost a child, friends of theirs saying things like, well, at least you have two others, I mean, just things that you're like, how, and
Oops.
I'm thinking no one's wants, I don't believe people are wanting to be cruel, of course not, right?
Mhm.
But there's the level, and I think this is somewhat cultural for us, the Western American, like there's a way in which we get so uncomfortable with the pain that we're just seeing. We just want it to go away.
That, yeah.
So it's like, if I can just say something that will maybe take this pain in you and push it back about 10 feet from me, then I'll feel better. And so I'm trying to make me feel better about what I'm going to say to you. And I think it's just such a, so anyway, I think one of the, I know we were talking about this before, but I think someone one time said there's 2 phrases to remember in people's pain. And this was the most helpful thing for me is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just really sorry for the pain you're going through. Even if it's pain that you brought upon yourself. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I have sorrow with you that this is really ripping your world apart. And secondly is like, I don't know what to say, but I love you. Like, I don't know what to say, but I do love you. And those 2 phrases are an invitation towards, and that's been super helpful. We've talked about that a little bit before, but are what is the, what is, can you think of like a particular moment in the like apex, kind of the crucible of suffering, again, either brought on by yourself or that, that someone met you in a way that like has changed the way in which you view and understand, pain, yourself, suffering, them, altered relationship? What's that look like for you? Smiling, Dave.
That's a monstrous question.
Yeah,
you're
hard to know
saying-
where to start.
What's that?
Hard to know where to start. That's
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, there are, of course, like instances that come to mind of people really coming through in the clutch with pain, but like, I don't know, there was a lot leading up to that moment and there was a lot kind of unpacking that moment later. But I mean, the people who have stood in that apex crux moment with me have been people that I've already had longstanding, at least 6 months of relationship with, where we've been investing in each other, and I feel like I know them and can trust that serrated edge that they're pushing into the pain with me. I mean, to make it really, I went through a season back in Denver where I stopped encountering God the way that I was used to, and I mean, if you might remember, I said I'm really good at blame when I'm in pain, and that was a long season of blaming God and self and all kinds of stuff. And a really helpful mentor back there said, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It's just that the old ways are never going to work again. And I was like, huh? So like, everything you've done so far, just don't do that anymore. Just, it's going to be a new thing. It's like, what? So it was the relationship coming into that, and it was her willingness to companion me on the backside of that made it palatable. But it was a brutal statement. I felt like I didn't even have ground to stand on to fight from at that point. So I don't know. There's a lot of those moments.
That kind of brought one of those statements back to me that from a long time ago that I hadn't thought about until you said that. But when I was reeling from something that had happened, I was in with a counselor, pastor / counselor. And I was, kind of in the, is my life ever going to be okay again season. And he said to me, in my experience, God is more interested in picking you up than he has been in letting you fall. Wow. And what I heard in that was hope and encouragement that he was planning to pick me up. I mean, that's the piece that I heard in that statement. And it was huge. I mean, it was just huge. Yeah. Like there's something good's going to happen here, maybe someday, years from now.
Ivy, anything jump out to you or stand out to you?
Oh, so many. I was just thinking of the people in my life who just showed an enormous amount of patience with me. Even now, but I'm thinking especially in my kind of teenage years when I was really sort of roller coastering through the whole abandonment thing and trying to pretend like I was fine and just, all of that happening at the same time. And uh, so much of what I needed and that I was just terrified to ask for was for somebody to say, "We want you here."
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and to see the people in my life who, by the grace of God, understood that and kept saying it to me, even when I forgot it every other minute, and were willing to keep reminding me of the truth of the love of God for me over and over and over again. Even when it seemed like I had it down, and even when I didn't, but and never got frustrated with me, that I could tell from needing to hear it over and over again. And even now at 30, those are still the people who gently remind me that I don't have to ask to come over, and they want me here, and they're glad to see me, and that really speaks of the love of God to me,
Yeah.
and the way that He doesn't leave us to ourselves, but reminds us of the truth and extends that over and over and over again. That was hard work, I'm sure, from them. But that was really healing for me over time. And if it only would have happened once, or, in my case, if it had only happened 10 times
Mhm.
and worn off 3 months later, it would have been very different.
Yeah, it's funny. As I've been thinking about this, I just realized how much, like, what a gift it is, and has been in some of the key moments of my life with, has been the people who've been able to, when I couldn't hold the thing that was true, or when I couldn't find the hope that was not, that was there, I just couldn't find it. I couldn't see it. That they didn't make me hold it. They told me they would hold it until I was ready to hold it. That they would,
Yeah.
they would be the reminders. Like, don't burden yourself for trying to get it all right, or figure out to believe the right thing. I just, like, I'll be with you, and I'll hold this, and I'll just gently remind you of it until you can pick it up, and it can be part of your soul again. And man, I tell you that those
Yeah.
one of those people are, like, they're with me to this day, and as far as trusted, and but and that's some of the gift I think we get to give one another. All right, last question before we sign off. What likelihood of you guys not having pain in the future, suffering of some sorts, maybe acute, maybe chronic, right? We're all going to get old and have things come to an end, right? So suffering is coming. How, when you think about, like, how are you preparing to suffer? How are you preparing to suffer?
Oh, I don't like this question.
I didn't prep this one for you. I thought of it later, and I was like, I'm just going to ask this as we close. So how are you preparing to suffer?
I I really kind of think I might know the answer to this.
Yes.
For
Good. Take a really long time to answer, Donna, so that there isn't any
well,
left for us. That's great.
I really think, I mean, we're all going to suffer. Scripture tells us that the whole way through, we're going to share in the sufferings of Christ. God causes calamity, all the things he says about that he's going to bring these, he's going to allow these things. He's either going to cause them or he's going to allow them, however you want to look at it, but for our good. And so I think the most important thing to prepare for that is that we absolutely know what we believe about God. And if we believe that he's loving and kind and good, then when that happens, um, we know what the anchor is underneath the free fall. I mean, we know that he's doing something either for us or for somebody watching, or for all of it, since he can do a squillion things at once. But I do think that what we believe about God is the key. It's the key to how we endure that. So that's my answer to that question.
Which is not a wow, I'm gonna do a terrible 90s reference, but it's not a Matrix download into the back of your head in a minute, right? That is not born out in a moment. That is born out over time. The believing because you know him, because you've spent time with him, because you have intimacy with him. That's like the relational language of, like,
and pain can cause that.
right?
I mean, pain can be the crucible that happens in, and usually is.
Yeah.
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 No, Donna, that's so good. That's sort of in the same line of sort of what I was thinking, but I like the way you said it. I think for me, so much of it is um, in light of knowing who God is, rehearsing the story of what He's done in my life already. That's a discipline that my mom really modeled for me and really kind of worked into me in my life, which I'm so thankful for now. This idea that you rehearse the stories of God's faithfulness to you, and you tell them to each other over and over again, so that when something bad is happening, you have that to be reminded of. Not just like the theology of that is true, and that's essential. If your theology is wrong, you're in trouble. But being able to look at my own life and say, this is what God's done for me. And in my own life, I can also now look back, not all the time, but at some of the biggest wounds in my life. I think of my dad leaving in particular. And I can say with confidence now that God chose to plant some of the best things about me and my life into the space that my dad left when he chose to leave. And God didn't have to do it that way, but he chose to do it.
Yeah.
So some of the gifts I'm most thankful for are planted in that ground now. And I think God did that on purpose so that it would remind me that that's true. I can't say that I see that clearly every time something happens in my life. The why is not always clear to me, and that I resent that sometimes. But having one or two to be able to look and say, this is what God is like, and this is what He does, makes it a lot easier for me the times where He doesn't give me that amount of clarity. That's where the trust has to kick in. But that storytelling element is important for me, just as a way to prepare for whatever's coming next.
Yeah, that's great, Eddie. Dave, thoughts?
For me, I think probably the best safety net in my life in terms of trying to suffer better is the people in my life who know how I cope with pain when I'm not doing well with it. So like I would suggest getting on like a webinar and talking about how you deal with pain poorly, so the whole church knows what you look like when you're not doing well with pain.
Oh, now that you say
Dave?
that.
Guys, where'd Dave go? What happened? Where'd Dave go? He's isolating. He's isolating.
Yeah, he's not doing well. And then interestingly, actually between our little prep call and this call, I think one of the ways that God gets my attention with that stuff is actually my kid, my son Ripley. He got a splinter like Sunday, or no, it doesn't matter what day. Suffice it to say, he had a splinter and he was dead set on it not coming out. And he was dead set on me not even seeing it, because he knew that there would be some kind of pain associated with removing it. And having kind of begun churning these concepts in my brain for our talk, and then having to deal with my son avoiding the healing pain, right, of letting his dad do work on this splinter kind of thing, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, God has like a laser pointer that he can use whenever he wants, with like, it's right there, you see that? That's you avoiding the healing pain that I have for you. So I don't know, a lot of it's incarnate, but I think equipping my friends to know what it looks like when I suffer poorly is a big deal.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, Ivy, Donna, Dave, it's been so great to be with you. Those of you who come and joined us and listened in, really grateful for to be a part of a community of people who are going to try and be honest about how life really plays itself out, that we're not going to live in either an ivory tower of just ideas of how something could be when if it was pain, but actually lived it and would choose to do so together. And that's my hope for our community. That's my hope for how we're going to live with even the people outside of our community, to invite them to this kind of honest reality of both God's goodness, His love, His grace, and His peculiar, at times severe mercy on our lives and in our lives. So anyway, super grateful for each of you. Love you very much. To all those who've joined us, thanks for being with us. We'll have one of these again on something else challenging and unique about the scriptures and about our lives. So, but anyway, thanks to each of you, and y'all have a great night. You're loved, and we'll see you soon.